Hey folks, I'm Dan Lapel for New Focus Recordings. Really glad to be joined by Van Stiefel, good friend of mine for many years, and excited to be putting out his newest album, Spirits, a week from Friday, which would be, I'm blanking on my dates here, but let's get this right.
27th, I think, was the date we talked about.
August 27th, 2021. How's everything, Van?
Good. Yeah, the sun is setting on our summer.
Yes,
But
it is.
It's been a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been good to be outside and sort of seeing some people again. So we had a collaboration back in the earlier days of New Focus. Your album Solaris, FCR 115, which was a collection of electric guitar music, mostly chamber stuff, also a solo, and the sort of operating principle there was sort of electric guitar music written in a way that sort of reflected a certain amount of classical technique and sensibility, I think, right? Is that a fair representation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the pieces involved interactive computer,
Right, that's
and
right. Yeah,
one of the pieces had violin, which
right.
was really a kind of like chamber music sonata kind of
Yeah,
piece.
yeah,
Um, there were a number of solos on it, which actually somewhat resemble the solos on Spirits as well. I think
yeah,
there's a continuity there.
yeah. The Shape of
Um,
Hands set.
you've played a number of times,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
different venues.
Uh,
Uh,
I definitely, listening through to Spirits, I was reminded of those pieces on several occasions.
and I'm reminded, I'm sort of off the grid here a little bit, but I'm reminded of an earlier collaboration when we did a piece I wrote called Another Ring of Fire,
Right.
which was for the String Quartet. That was you and Bryce and who was it?
Yeah.
Dave and Rami.
Right.
No, Rami was not on that particular
Not on that session, but
session. But anyway, the layered kind of quasi minimal vibe, I guess in some ways is being kind of echoed in various pieces on this,
right. Maybe
on
especially
this
ground, right?
but especially ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The
So
ground is
yeah, go ahead.
well, we were sort of starting at the end, but ground I
Yeah.
think of as a little bit of an epilogue in the overall trajectory of the album. And I do think of the album as a kind of trajectory, which is
Yeah.
very old-fashioned, but in my head I imagine this kind of storyline through it, and abstract storyline. But ground is a little bit different in that it has more independent parts than any of them, right? It has 5 parts as opposed to a lot of the others that have fewer. It's more, well, it's more, I guess, minimal, post-minimal, and like some of the others, it plays around with the number 5, right? There's this 3 against 2 rhythm at the end of it, and there's lots of perfect fits through that, and so I'm kind of playing a game with that. It started off as a looper pedal piece. I kind of came up with the ground line in doing a loop, and then later wrote it out as independent parts. But I need to make an arrangement for it for solo. It could be arranged
Oh
as a
yeah.
solo with a loop.
Cool. Yeah,
I think it would be cool.
I mean, it's interesting to start here. And let's listen to it in a minute, and then work backwards through the disc.
Yeah, sure.
And
But it is kind of like that earlier piece, so maybe
yeah,
it
it
is
is right. Like Another Ring of Fire. That was
hmm
right. Another Ring of Fire.
Yeah, Another Ring of Fire. That's right.
Uh, and it sort of reflects this sort of like a post-minimalist strain in your work, which is present, but I would say not really a defining feature of your music. It's sort of like a jumping off point.
Yeah, certainly not in this CDs,
Yeah,
except for that piece. Yeah,
that
that's
piece.
true.
Well, let's take a listen to some of this last track on the record, Ground, which is 5 guitars layered. Here we go. Great. So as we were sort of saying before, that piece Ground sort of harkens back in some ways to the electric guitar quartet you wrote now probably about 18, 19 years ago, I would say.
Yeah,
And
crazy.
the contrast for me between this album and Solaris, uh, which is the early record on New Focus, this one, first of all, feels, not that the other one wasn't personal, but you're playing and performing on all of these tracks. It's just you, and it feels much more like that distance that results from handing a notated piece over to another interpreter isn't there, right? This is just very much a personal statement, but it's also reflective of your compositional sensibility, but you sort of mix it up in a lot of different ways, right? There's some pieces which are recorded just beginning to end. Others are sort of cut and pasted afterwards in the studio. There's a lot of layering with processing and effects and stuff like that. So it makes for like a really interesting journey that finishes where we just started. And maybe now we'll start where it starts, or we'll continue where it starts with this track, King of Cups, which we hear you playing lap steel over this sort of glitchy processed accompaniment guitar.
Right.
Set this one up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I work with guitar in a sort of personal way, as you say, but I also work with computers that way, and sometimes it's writing computer music or using computers to make music. It feels like cooking. You kind of start off from one place and then you add various things to it and you get somewhere you didn't expect, right? So with the accompaniment of that track, I did sort of compose a chord progression, but each of those chords were recorded separately and then processed each chord one by one separately. um, and I didn't really know where that was going at all. Eventually, I ran that through a guitar pedal again. So it was sort of computer music and then kind of refed through more electric guitar type effects. And that's what creates a lot of the kind of popping sound with it. And it provides both. It's kind of like the rhythm section is both the rhythm and the guitar. It's like the percussion and the guitar kind of blended together in an electronic sounding accompaniment. It sounds like a guitar, but barely, right?
Right. Right.
Um, the lap steel is the only track that I play the lap steel on. I happen to own this great 1962 electro lap steel guitar, and I have a certain kind of melodic thing I do with that instrument. I can't play a lot of like Hawaiian jazz or whatever. It's just like that's the melodic world that I can play on the lap slide. And I thinking a lot about Johnny Paycheck's first album, and there's a fantastic lap guitarist on that album that just the sound of the lap guitar really worked at trying to get something close to that sound. So I guess that does kind of connect a little bit with some of the influences like Chet Atkins and Les Paul, with the idea of these layered finger style electric players. But that's another one. I wish I could remember his name. I'll remember it when we're done here.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a cool point, because I think the lap steel and the processed material coexist in this really interesting way. It's like you brought
yeah.
some.
The lap is very pure. It's like a
Yeah,
very pure lap sound, and then the electric guitar stuff is just burnt beyond recognition, really.
yeah, you sort of contextualize this thing that we associate with a very different kind of slightly older kind of popular music within this I don't know, more modern sensibility, I guess, like a Radiohead vibe or something.
Right.
Does Radiohead even count as modern anymore? Probably not, but
Probably not. Well, it does if you're my age, but yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's like a
Yeah,
Kid A vibe or something. Um,
right.
cool. Well,
I do think, I do have to do a shout out to Paul Lansky. He's not an, I wasn't thinking about Paul Lansky when I was making this CD, but once I made it, I realized, oh my God, this is like a Paul Lansky CD.
Yeah.
I really do owe him something,
Cool. Uh, let's take a listen to a bit of this opening track, King of Cups. Yeah, that's such a great texture. Let's talk a little bit about Memory Jug, which is the first track we hear some acoustic guitar on the record.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and it's a pretty different vibe from King of Cups.
yes, yeah, it is. I mean, I suppose there's this kind of folk edge to it that makes me think a little bit of like country music. I was interested in alternative tunings that are one of a kind, that are this kind of idiosyncratic, crazy tuning, where I had some higher strings, thinner strings tuned very, very low and interspersed with normal tuned guitar strings. Um, and I would play more percussive and with bent notes and kind of oddball harmonies. I guess I was inspired a little bit by Bill Orkut, who's a guitarist I really admire. He plays all sorts of things, but he has some kind of odd percussive tunings, kind of Derek Bailey-ish. And anyway, I went into the Silvertone Studios in Ardmore, PA, where Alfred, my friend there, was recording me. He gets a really good acoustic guitar sound. So we recorded like 3 hours of quasi improv. Like I wrote out some chords and some rhythms that I knew I wanted to do. And then I later took excerpts from really different parts of that 3 hour jam or whatever, and kind of created these collage pieces, or at least for that track, for that layer. A memory jug, by the way, is a piece of folk art where it's usually funereal, right? Where you put like little trinkets, odds and ends, personal items of someone who's passed, onto this jug, and then that's placed at the gravesite. So the idea of kind of collage and fragments that come from different places put together.
Yeah.
It really reflects the process of Memory Jug and Pink Cloud and what's the other one? Ghost Flare. Yeah, all have that same technique.
Right.
Whereas this weird acoustic guitar and then some other stuff added to that,
Right.
built around it.
Which is actually as distinguished from some of the other tracks, which are through recorded. If that's a
yes, pre-recorded. Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Which is cool because I think without even necessarily knowing that that's a difference in process from track to track, you sense sort of different structural principle at work.
Yeah, but I wanted that timbre to kind of return. I didn't want it to be just one piece. I wanted it to be like, oh, that weird band is back.
Right. The Memory Jug Band.
Yeah, exactly. The Memory Jug Band. Yeah.
And yeah, I think the fragmentary nature of the material, but also the sound world, with these sort of, I don't know, like higher pitched, like percussive type sounds that just have like a little bit of pitch embedded in them, and yeah, it's a really nice texture. Let's take a listen. This is Memory Jug. Let's talk about the title track, Spirits, which is a little distinct from some of the other solos, right? In terms of the
Mm,
processing and also use of the freeze pedal in a structural way.
right, right. Yeah, so interspersed with the, quote ensemble pieces or the layered pieces are a bunch of very, very short solos, like just like 2 minute solos. And I felt like Spirits was kind of a cross between the layered guitar and the solos in a way, which is partly why I chose it as the kind of title track. I felt like if you picked one tune from the track, from the whole thing, it was sort of like that has the mood of the rest of the tracks. Again, this very contemplative kind of vibe to it. It actually reminds me a lot, technically, from a compositional point of view, of the solos that I wrote for you on that other CD. In a way, the way I approached the harmonies and the intervals and stuff, more like the music on Solaris than maybe some of the other
Yeah.
solos. Um, I was using a sustain pedal, much the same way that a pianist would use a sustain pedal to, bring out the harmonic underpinning of intervals that come out of that, but also to create kind of a counter melody
Yeah.
in places. And the more perhaps unique thing is that I processed the sustain separately from the way I treat the guitar. And I have these layers of tremolos that move at different rates. And so there's this kind of background glow of tremolos moving at different rates, kind of haunting the melody was the way I put it in the notes.
Mhm.
And it creates this more mysterious vibe for me.
Is it actually? I said a freeze pedal, but you use the term sustain pedal. Is it not a?
Well, I mean, I guess that freeze pedal is what it is. I mean,
Yeah,
it is.
it functions. Yeah, basically. Yeah,
I think of it as a sustain pedal,
that's probably a better
but
name.
it picks one note that
Yeah,
you're sustaining, or one thing that you're ringing
yeah.
through.
But it's
And
interesting that you think of this as being the closest. I mean, it would be almost a cool experiment to play some of those earlier solos with this
yeah,
pedal.
I would try it.
I,
Yeah,
I might want to do that because I know what you mean. They were really, or they are very much composed with this sort of implied counterpoint approach, and sort of registral delineation, and so that'd be pretty
yeah. It's
neat.
got polyphonic melody, right? It's usually
Right.
just one note at a time. You're
Yeah.
rarely attacking two notes, but you do get a sense of like
Yeah. So that's a
one of
cool
the
idea.
heart.
I should try that sometime. Um,
Yeah, I think of a couple of them that it would work well with.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's great because in the context of this track here, we get these sort of pillars of activity, and the ear is drawn to different registers and different sustained tones that reframe the harmony either above or below the sustained pitch, which is sort of
Eh,
uh, it's neat. Um,
Yeah, the effect with the tremolo, I mean, like great guitar amps, like I play a Princeton reverb that I really love. They have that tremolo knob on it, that can give you but you can only get that knob, at one rate and depth at a time. Otherwise, you're sitting there twisting the knobs. Um, with this, I wrote uh, a max patch that would affect that. But it would move at different rates, and so it would sort of measure the long notes in different kind of pulses,
hmm, yeah,
which is a unique sort of thing that I really kind of had to fuss with to
so that's
get it.
cool because then the tremolo effect isn't static, which
It isn't one static
yeah,
tremolo,
so
right?
often
It's
can.
kind of counterpoint of tremolos.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. All right, let's take a listen to a bit of this. This is Spirits.
Okay.
So the longest track on the record, and also one of the most contrasting, is Harbor, almost 11 minutes long. It's the only one that we hear a non-guitar timbre that's so dominant. I guess in the other movements we hear some processed sounds that don't quite sound like guitar anymore, but they were originally generated from guitar sounds, right? But here we hear these keyboard samples.
Right.
Was that sort of a conscious thing to sort of right in the middle of the record have this track that brought in this very different sound world?
Well, there's a track called Pink Cloud that has a synthesizer in it, and also a little bit of piano sounds that come from Dan Truman's Bitklavier, but they're sort of in the background. And the piano sound, is more obviously a piano sound in Harbor.
Right.
And this piece, I really like the first piece, King of Cups. There's this antiphonal, just aspect in the accompaniment, and so there's a left and a right that are kind of completing each other's sentences in terms of the harmonic progression and how the rhythm unfolds. This piece was, the most composed in the sense that I kind of started with the pitches and the rhythms and really kind of made that work before I tried to do any kind of processing or anything like that. So I originally thought I would record like a piano, playing this, but then I realized that the actual mechanical quality of the sample piano was really closer to what I was after. The rhythm in this is kind of not quite mechanical and not quite organic. It's really this strange blend of those, where it sounds like there's this intuitive timing thing going on, but I was actually being very fussy about how the rhythm works as the harmony unfolds. And so in a way, it sounds paradoxically more natural for it to be these samples, And then kind of like spirits, I apply a kind of delay to some of the samples that also divide the rhythm further. And then the guitar part is just these long values, kind of like a cantus firmus or something. It's like these really long notes. And the piano and the delayed piano sounds kind of divide up that in various species of division, The effect is, for me, that it sounds a little bit like the water, kind of hitting the sides of boats as they're anchored in the water.
Yeah. I mean, just in terms of sort of density of material and rate of change, I feel like this track slows things down and sort of draws you into, as you say, like some of the variable durations and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's just little details, these little tiny things.
Right, as opposed to something like Memory Jug, where there's sort of a lot packed into this machine texture that's sort of spinning,
Right.
Cool. Let's listen to some of Harbor. Well, it's really cool to have a chance to talk about these different tracks to get a sense of the overall trajectory of the album.
Absolutely.
And I know that when were talking about, when you first sent this material to me and we were thinking about putting it out, and we talked back and forth a lot about if we wanted to put it out in the main New Focus catalog or on the Panoramic imprint, which is where it is coming out on Panoramic, and how it sort of occupies a very unique space. I mean, it is clearly sort of composed music. A lot of stuff on Panoramic is sort of integrates improvisation or stylistic ambiguity. I guess that's present, the stylistic ambiguity. But it does feel very much like a sort of composed statement from beginning to end. And yet both of us sort of, I think, eventually landed on the idea that Panoramic felt like the right space for it, in contrast to Solaris, which had that distance of like presenting a score to performers and recording it. And I will be the first to admit that the boundaries between these imprints are not always super clear, but this one felt like a Panoramic release somehow. Yeah, I mean, how did you feel about that sort of decision making process?
Well, I was happy about the idea of maybe, charting a new path. I mean, honestly, if you were brave enough and interested enough to listen to my complete Solaris and then follow that up with, Spirits, you would probably not find albums that different. There really is some crossover.
Sure.
But for me personally, there's a certain focus on process in the Spirits that involves, mixing and electronics and production, as well as my particular approach to the guitar.
Yeah.
That makes it a little bit less of, writing the screenplay for the actors to perform.
Sure.
It's a sort of written and directed by kind of, project.
Yeah.
And while Panoramic is there's still maybe 10 or 15 at max releases on that imprint. So
22 now. Yeah.
Okay, 22 more than I thought. Well, so it gets to
Yeah.
Occupy a spot, which is you probably didn't have that many when I did Solaris on New Focus, right? So
Yeah.
I was,
I think
probably in the first 20 of those.
You were the 15th or the 14th.
Okay. All right.
So in both cases, you were having a role in shaping the character.
Early adopter.
Yeah.
An early adopter, and look at New Focus now. So who knows what I'm doing now with Panoramic?
Right.
It'll be awesome.
Yeah. No, I think what you're pointing out about that this is sort of a hybrid of various different practices of yours.
Right.
That does sort of seem to speak to something about what I think I created Panoramic to do. But as with all these things, I had this, I created it, and then it just sort of takes on a life of its own.
We'll see what happens. Yeah.
We'll see what happens. And each thing that gets added to it, it's sort of for slightly different reasons. And I'm glad for that, because that means that music isn't really falling into buckets, increasingly right. So I think the buckets that we were used to when you and I were younger just don't really exist anymore. I mean, the industry might still try to put things, but most projects just don't fit, which is great.
Well, I see the utility of fitting within a genre. I mean, I think it's great. I'm envious of people who say, "Well, I write this kind of music, and here it is." I would love to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But when I make something that feels more authentic to me, it just doesn't come out like that.
Right.
So I need a place like New Focus or Panoramic,
or whatever,
to frame to provide some kind of frame to some kind of community, for what's happening here.
Well, this quality has always been one of the things I love most about your music, and so happy to have it and happy to celebrate it, and eager to have the folks out there in YouTube land check it out. So please do.
Okay,
Comes out on August 27th.
please do.
It's Panoramic 21, Van Stiefel Spirits. So I don't forget, let me just shout out some of the important people who worked behind the scenes on this record. It was recorded at Silvertone Studios, Ardmore, PA. The engineer was Alfred Goodrich, mastered by Ryan Strieber at Octaven Audio. The cover art was by Van's wife, Caroline Lathan Stiefel, and she's also the dedicatee of all the pieces. The layout was by Jessica Slavin, and special thanks to Lou Ledyard. And
Yeah, Lou Ledger. Yeah, he loaned me some great guitars that I played on this CD.
nice, nice.
Thanks, Lou.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you, Van. It's a really beautiful,
Thank you, Dan.
beautiful recording, and great to hear this side of your work. So
Excellent. Thank you.
yeah,
Looking forward to this.
likewise.
All right.
Okay, thanks again. Take care, everybody. Bye.